theme of reimagining youth skills in India post-pandemic. Well, on behalf of Vicky, I welcome you all for joining us for this particular session. And to formally welcome you all, I request Mr. Dilip Shenoy, Secretary General Vicky, to deliver his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumit, and very good afternoon to all of you. I take this opportunity to wish all the panelists and the participants on the occasion of the World Youth Skills Day. This morning, we had the Prime Minister inaugurate celebrations today, along with Minister Dharmendra Pradhan and Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar, actually talk about many significant steps that the ministry has taken and the need to really reimagine skills in India post-pandemic. And this is really the topic of today. In 2014, July 15th was nominated and designated as the World Youth Skills Days. In 2015, the Prime Minister actually launched the Skill India mission. So in many ways, today is also the 6th anniversary, as Minister Pradhan said, of the Skill India mission. And I think this is very important that all of us have got together here. In situations such as the pandemic and post-pandemic, and even during normal times, there was a need for all stakeholders to work together, including government, NGOs, industry, to adopt more relevant skill policies and processes and systems and develop an ecosystem to create a labor market and encourage entrepreneurship. Many of you, the panelists who are going to be speaking after me, have done tremendous work and path-breaking work in many of the areas, including apprenticeships and others. But yet, there is something which industry could do. If there is one message I would like to leave with industry, is that if industry creates a pull for skilled workforce by doing two very simple things, other than taking apprentices, which is there's a whole program around that. First is that if you are looking for any person to hire any person where there is a skill certification involved, just ensure that you say only, we'll accept applications of those people who have the relevant certificate from from within the NSQF system. So that's a very simple thing to do. Second, with all of the people who are working in your organizations, let it even be the person, if you have, outsourced staff for managing your canteen, for example, or cleaning or housekeeping staff, just ensure that each one of them goes through the RPL process and gets certified. And encourage them to place their certificate at the place of work. And if we create pride on the certification issue, then it would actually enable this to happen. And the third thing is that one thing the pandemic has taught us that digitization of learning and training could really create opportunities for further entrepreneurs in this area. This is something which we should adopt and take forward. In the morning, you had the Prime Minister and the Minister in the whole program. There were courses on blending learning that were launched. I think it's a good effort to happen there. And the final message is increase lifelong learning and opportunities for the employees and everyone that you come in contact with. I'm sure that this event today would generate a lot of ideas and suggestions, both which we can actually share with government and also share with the youth and also industry. So once again, a very warm welcome to each one of you who have joined us today from different parts of the ecosystem, and do keep well and keep safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shenoy, for your thoughts and clearly the three takeaways from your speeches: digitization, blended learning, and lifelong learning. That's the key. Lifelong learning is something that's the key for today's discussion. So moving forward, I request Mr. Manish Sabharwal, who is the chair of FICCI Skill Development Committee and chairman and co-founder Team Lead Services Limited, to deliver his theme address. Mr. Sabharwal is the head of our skill development committee at FICCI, and our initiatives, whatever we take, is under his guidance. So I request Mr. Sabharwal to share his perspective for today's discussion. Over to you, Mr. Sabharwal.
Thanks, Sumit. So some people would say it's probably premature to talk about post-COVID. I mean, we don't know whether we are at the start, middle, or end of it, but you can't predict the future. Every skill discussion ends up in somebody wanting a report on where jobs will be in the next 10 years. And I come back to my same bugbear that you can't buy an air ticket from Delhi to Bangalore for 2030. So why do you, even if somebody tries to sell it to you, please don't buy it. So, but just because you can't predict the future doesn't mean you can't prepare for the future. And I think that many of India's problems during the pandemic are pre-existing conditions. I like to say that the long run has caught up with India. You know, the most stupid thing Keynes ever said was, in the long run, we are dead. We are not dead in the long run. Our kids will be here. We all sit under trees that we didn't plant. And the long run has caught up with India. So if we were to step back and say that how would we design a system for the long run when we can't predict where jobs will be, I would suggest 5 design principles. They would be learning by doing, learning while learning, learning with flexibility, learning with modularity, and learning with signaling value. Learning by doing is obvious because skill systems need to pray to one God, which is employers, and practical training is much more important than theoretical training. Learning while earning is really important because my parents had 35-year careers. I'll have 45-year careers, and my kids will have 55-year careers. So employed learners will cross full-time learners, or should cross full-time learners in our lifetime, if somehow we're going to figure out how to pay for skill development. There still is a market failure in skill financing. Employers can't manufacture their own employees. Learning with flexibility means we must be indifferent to 4 campuses: online campus, on-site campus, on-campus campus, and on the job campus. I mean, today we have this apartheid where a university must look like Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard, or IITs to be a university. And I think that does disservice to the flexibility that is needed in learning. Flexibility with modularity means seamless connectivity between certificates, diplomas, and degrees, which means erasing this artificial partition between education and skills, which is really a child of sort of University 1.0 being started by religions, University 2.0 being started by governments, University 3.0 being some sage on stage in a beautiful campus. But University 4.0, 5.0 is not isolated on a campus, and it needs modularity, it needs to be connected to all parts of the learning ecosystem. The learning with signaling value is not only about degrees. It is also about the right balance of quantity and quality, right? You can be like IITs and IIMs with tight entry gates and wide open exit gates, or you could be like ITIs with wide open entry gates and wide open exit gates. The chartered accountant exam is wide open entry gates and tight exit gates. So I think the learning with signaling value comes from the right balance between entry gates and exit gates also. Now, obviously, there's a tension here. You know, as John Gardner, an education secretary of the US, wrote a great book called Can We Be Equal and Excellent? And I think that's the heart in a democracy. That's the challenge. Everybody wants to be equal, but you also need to be excellent. But I think COVID has created 3 policy windows for India. There's a structural policy window, the new world of work, the new world of organizations, the new world of education. You know, in a world where Google knows everything, knowing is useless. We always thought about work being done from an office and on a full-time contract. Work is something you do, it's not a place you go. I think geopolitics is a very important factor in India's favor in the next 20 years. There's China fatigue all over the world. I think people's supply chains are being reconfigured from just in time to just in case. And most importantly, there's a global glut of capital, right? People underestimate the impact of 40% of the world's bonds trading at less than 1%. 20% of the world's bonds trade at negative interest rates. When fixed income becomes no income, you will overvalue growth. And this is why India has 150 companies now worth more than $1 billion in the private markets. We only have 350 companies in public markets worth more than $1 billion. So no country has this ratio of unlisted to listed unicorns that India has. And this is really an important pipeline for India's employment landscape in the next few years. So if you think about the policy window for India, we can go back to the same debate on whether we have a jobs problem or a wages problem. I'm open to debate. I'm clear we don't have a jobs problem, we have a wages problem. And you only raise wages by improving the productivity of our regions, our sectors, our firms, and our individuals. I mean, I live in Karnataka, my parents live in UP. They have the same GDP, but Karnataka does it with 1/4 the number of people. Obviously, firms, we know the 24 times difference in productivity between manufacturing firms, and in individuals, we know the difference. So I would submit that, Einstein once said that he gave an exam to his students, and 5 minutes into the exam, one of the kids stood up and said, "Professor Einstein, the questions in this year's exam are exactly the same as last year." He said, "Don't worry, the answers are different this year." And I think that's really what's happening to all of us who are working in education and skills, that the questions are the same. How do you create a wage premium? How do you find a sustainable model? But you have to sort of, catastrophes like COVID don't increase the support for change, they reduce the resistance to change. And I think that's what I've noticed all around, whether we're talking about compliance reform or labor reform or university reform. So I'm hoping we can bring NEP 2020 from its 15-year glide path to a 5-year glide path, and just reimagine sort of University 5.0, Apprenticeship 3.0, employment exchanges 3.0, because you can't distinguish as hard between education, employment, and employability. The 3 E's are not 3 planes taking off from 3 different runways. They're 3 planes maybe taking off from the same runway. But I think in the long run, you'll have to even converge these 3 planes into one. So I think it's a unique opportunity for all of us to reimagine universities, apprenticeships, employment exchanges. And I think that'll have a huge impact on skill development in the next 10 years. I don't think skill development in the next 10, 15 years is going to look anything like it did in the last 15. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I think you very rightly mentioned this is a time for reimagining university, reimagining our entire skilling system, and a lot of the various aspects of the skilling ecosystem itself. So once again, thank you so much. Now moving forward, we have a special address from Mr. Atul Kumar Tiwari. Good afternoon, Mr. Tiwari. Thank you so much for kindly joining us today. Mr. Tiwari is Additional Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, Government of India. And we have requested Mr. Tiwari to share his perspective on the roadmap towards reimagining youth skills in India. So may I request Mr. Tiwari to kindly share his perspective with us. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Sumit. I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, sir. We are.
It is always such a pleasure to listen to Mr. Manish Sabharwalji for a very coherent, well thought out, detailed thinking on the skilling. Manishji, we always keep on learning while listening to you. So in a way, we are skilling ourselves listening to you. And it's always a pleasure to listen to Mr. Dilip Chennai, who has been associated with the skill ecosystem for quite some time. Distinguished panelists. Today we had our World Youth Skill Day, which was addressed by Honorable Prime Minister. And Prime Minister very patiently and rightly, he made the skill development as a huge task, a national need. And he said that the skill development is the basis for Atmanirbhar Bharat. And he also highlighted very interestingly the cultural tradition of Vishwakarma Jayanti and how we have been celebrating the skills in all its splendor ever since many hundreds of years ago. And in the end, he said that India's aim is to provide smart skilled workforce to the world through reskilling, upskilling, and reskilling and upskilling. That has been his mantra, which has given to us last year also, earlier also, and this year also he repeated that mantra to us for our guidance. I have worked in different sectors, and I find the skilling sector to be the most challenging sector because it is in the cusp of not only education but also the economy and also the how we value the skilling itself. And as Manishji was saying about the signaling part of the skilling, unless until we have something to do which we can improve the signaling quotient of the skilling, in a sense, linking it with the national education policy and taking it forward in a convergent way, then only we'll be able to make the skilling attractive, smart, and which will be able to entice the youngsters to come forward and get skilled. We last 6 years, there has been a lot of achievements on the skilling part. If you can take just the example of ITIs from 4,000, we have almost 14,000. We have around 2,000 plus qualifications. We have 37 sector skill councils. We have the NCVT, which has come in. We have, of course, we have the NSDC, which is a kind of a PPP between government and the industry. We have apprenticeship. We have common course norms. There are a lot of schemes which have been converged with the skilling system in terms of NSQF level, common course norms, and etc. So in a way, if we want one way to look at the journey of the skilling so far, there has been an expansion, but we also had, in fact, today also the Honorable Minister also launched 75 new Jan Shikshan Sansthan, which is another part of the skilling ecosystem, which caters to the unprivileged section, neo-literates, non-literates, and the women and the backward classes in the remote areas of countries. And we have just managed to reach 307 Jan Shikshan Sansthan will be happening now. One remarkable thing has always been that the government, on its part, the policymakers, they have always paid a lot of emphasis on skill. And now that we have Honorable Minister Sri Dharmendra Pradhanji, who is also handling education as well as the skill development. We have Honorable MOS Sri Rajiv Chandrasekharji, who is also in the skill development and the MATI. One can sincerely expect that there would be certain conjointed effort towards skilling becoming aspirational, and as well as revitalizing or reimagining the youth skills in India. We have been going through, since I am a civil servant, so I will talk to like a civil servant. So I would say that we have been trying, we are getting into a new cycle of the schemes. So on the one hand, we are going to expand the Jan Shikshan Sansthan, which caters to its own target group at a very economical costs. We also have the apprenticeship program, which Mr. Manish Agarwal is the authority over that. There also we are bringing the amendment to the act, whereby we are making things more easier for the industries to join, and also incentivize and attract more youth to join apprenticeship. We also getting in the new cycle of the NAPS, National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme. Along with the amendments, we want to make it more attractive, and so that we can have more apprenticeship opportunities for the youth, as was promised by Honorable Finance Minister during the budget this year. We are also in the final advanced stages of getting a plan approved so that we can improve the government ITIs network in all over India. We are also, with all that, we also have to work towards designing a new flagship scheme, if I can say so, for Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, which has to essentially not only look at the present need, but also for the future demands. And while we keep on strengthening the ITIs, JSSs, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Kendras, we also have to see what are the new areas which are developing, like clean energy, electric mobility, chemical, pharmaceuticals. The way the manufacturing is being encouraged in India through the PLI, etc., that is another one sector. Ultimately, what we need to have is there has to be something like choice-based skilling architecture for the youth. And that is here where we while as we strengthen the district skilling committee through the our Mahatma Gandhi fellows, which are being recruited and trained by the 9 IIMs in India under the our World Bank aided program. While we try to appreciate the local level skilling demand, we also have to look at the future and try to have a choice-based system whereby not only the government-funded skilling schemes are also there, but we also allow people to learn and educate themselves in innovative ways in newer areas. And this is where the convergence, the work synergy with the private sector will be very, very important to us. And we request the industry to come forward and help us in any ways they can. And I understand as part of the ministry, we also understand that there are so many areas which requires huge lot of improvement. And so long as that we approach with some very clear, realistic manner the problems which you are facing, where are we, where we want to go, what more can be done. And this is a time I think we need to try all that we can so that the skilling becomes aspirational. Skilling is also provides livelihood to the people. Skilling also meets the emerging demands of the economy. Skilling is where the government and private sector, they will work together. Whether it requires re-strengthening or rebooting our sector skill council and the connect with the government and industry is concerned, whether it requires some more penetration in the hinterlands, whether it requires more participation from the state governments and working with them, whether it requires having some kind of partnership with so many skilling universities which we are having, like the Delhi, which they are doing, like in Jaipur, or say for team leads, or in Odisha, we are seeing a huge move on that side. We are also trying to get the PPP process, which is the Indian Institute of Skills, which is there in Mumbai and Gandhinagar. We are also trying in Kanpur, and another version which we'll try to operate in hopefully in some part of Eastern India. So what I would like to say is that the demand for the skilling in the demographic situation that we are presently in is continue to remain very strong. The commitment for the skilling is also going to be unwavering, and within the whatever limited scope which we have, once we link the skilling with the avenues which are opening by the national education policy. Today only we had the JSS Jan Shikshan Sansthan and National Institute of Open Schooling having an MOU with that. So there's a lot of work which is also going on the credit transfer mechanism, and how do we bring the vocationalization of education in a proper mainstream of the academic area. This is where a lot of challenge lies, and that is why it makes all the effort so exciting and full of different opportunities. So I would like to thank the FICCI and thank Mr. Chinoy, and through him to all the FICCI professionals we have come here today. And I'm sure that today's deliberation will also give us some ideas on how to design a scheme whereby we'll be able to give not only skills to the youth, but also livelihood and newer opportunities in a proper manner. Lastly, during the COVID time, we have had a lot of emphasis on the blended learning. Today itself, Director General Training, which controls the ITIs, we had 58 courses on the blended model. And I think this is a move which was underlined by Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Minister also, that the COVID is something which has made us look at the reality in a different way. And maybe during the COVID also, we have done quite of reskilling ourselves. And whatever the changes have happened, that has happened for the good, and the skilling ecosystem also needs to take into account. And for example, for that COVID care in the imminent problem of the COVID which may come, which one is expecting, we have also launched a very customized crash course program for healthcare workers in 6 job roles to train 1 lakh people, which was started by the blessings of Honorable Prime Minister on 18th of June. This is also one area where we need to a lot of working together. So one thing I'm observing is that we are ready to break down the barriers and work in a get out of our silos, and more ministries are also realizing that it is necessary to skilling to take place in an integrated manner, bending the demand and supply situation. And we are here to do whatever best we can. And hopefully, by the time we meet next year, there will be some substantial progress we would have made. We also have the World Skill event also going on. And in fact, the skilling ecosystem was under great stress due to lockdown situation all over in India. Now that we are coming out of it, surely the skilling per se and the way we approach the skilling after COVID is also going to see a lot of significant and positive changes. With that, I would like to thank FICCI and all the organizers for allowing me to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. Namaste, Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for kindly sharing some of the initiatives of the government in the skilling space. Sir, you mentioned about the work synergy and the requirement for industry to come forward so that skilling becomes aspirational. Sir, on the behalf of industry and behalf of FICCI, I would like to assure you that we'll do whatever is required of us to join hands with the initiatives of the government and make the entire ecosystem of skilling such that it's a choice-based skilling architecture for youth. So with that word, I thank you once again for your time. Uh, and thank you so much. And going forward, we have a very interesting panel discussion. It's a thematic panel which will be chaired by Mr. TV Mohandas Pai, who is the advisor of FICCI Skill Development Committee and chairman of Manipal Group. Uh, the theme of the session is Reimagining Youth Skills Post-Pandemic. We have a very interesting and distinguished panelist with us. So I request Mr. Mohandas Pai to kindly take over and conduct the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, folks. Welcome to this panel discussion. We're going to have an interesting panel. We have Mr. Shyamal Mukherjee, founder head, UN EWOC, International Center Bonn, Ms. Anita Rajan, CEO for the and VP Tata Community Services, Professor Niharika Vora, BC Delhi Skill University, and Mr. Siddharth Chaturvedi, EVP ISECT Group. We're all involved in the skilling area. I'll just make a short introduction and post the challenges. We are coming off COVID, and Manish has spoken eloquently about what is happening and the world is going to change. We know the world is going to change. Two, we have to now look back and see how the skilling program in this country has worked. Have we skilled people for jobs? Have we skilled people to improve productivity? What is the ability of people skilled to get jobs? What kind of jobs are being created in this country? Where are the jobs being created? Where is the economic growth? And how do we make sure the friction between skilled people and jobs is reduced so that we skill for jobs and we create jobs in areas where skilled people are available and where we need to make sure that we also skill people for jobs that are going to come in the future. And the future is going to be very different. We know that. We are seeing the digital revolution come to India. Digitization has taken off. Entire businesses are getting disrupted. And new kinds of jobs are coming. And new kinds of jobs are coming to various areas. And one of the challenges India faces is that job growth as per the EPFO data, which is a very good database because it's based on payments. I hope you'll all study it, is mostly in the south of this country. More and more people are getting skilled and becoming graduates in the north of this country. The economic growth in the north is less, as also the east, and the economic growth in the south is more. And the fertility in the south is very less. Fertility in the north is higher. And in the north, we're going to see more people come into the workforce. And in the south, we're going to see an aging society over the next 20, 25 years. And we are seeing immigration from this country to outside to the extent of maybe 500, 600,000 people who are educated, semi-skilled, etc. So this is a cocktail, which is a very interesting cocktail, and they mix. And we must see what is happening. And the last point I want to make is, we cannot have a one skill policy fit all in this country. We are too diverse. The skilling for Bihar has to be different from the skilling for Karnataka. The skilling for Rajasthan has to be different from the skilling for Telangana. And we can't have a one set all policy. Secretary spoke about backward communities, etc. People who are in labor-intensive industry, etc. So should we move to a skill vision per state or by district, etc.? These are large issues because we're speaking about this country. So let me start off by asking Mr. Shyamal Mukherjee, how do you see the post-COVID world as regards skilling? How do you see the job scenario in the country post-COVID? And what do you think are the 2 or 3 big challenges we'll face in this skilling industry that we are talking about?
Thank you very much, Dr. Pai. I'm Shamal Majumdar from UNESCO Univoc International Center, former head. So I'd like to thank Fiki for inviting me this discussion, which will be definitely will give me a lot of thoughts. This year again, World Youth Skill Day is taking place in a challenging context. This challenging context is going to stay, in my opinion, because we are living in a VUCA world. VUCA means volatile, unstable, complex, and ambiguous world. Pandemic is the outcome of that world. And if you ask me very frankly, there might be more such scenario will come near future. I will say under this condition, youth are out of jobs in turbulent times, out of school, and majority of youth their future become uncertain. Then the question comes, as you rightly said, how you are going to prepare the youth to combat this pandemic, not only this pandemic, future uncertainties. As Manish has rightly said, if you do not know the future, that doesn't mean you cannot make a plan. My recipe is, even if you do not know the future, you can plan how to fight. One thing is very clear under this situation, youth have to be agile and resilient if they have to survive and bounce back. Easy to say, difficult to do. Resilient is a mental characteristics. If you say any individual who is able to recover quickly from a difficult situation. But classically, technical vocational education has offered only technical skill. Things has to be changed. It has to play a key role in fostering resilience among the young people, more than technical skill. We have to reimagine the landscape of the youth skill in coming days. Mere technical skill is not good enough to survive in this situation when you do not know what things are going to change. Along with the technical skill, we need to a set of transversal skill which compose of 2 types. Higher cognitive skill like problem solving, creativity, and critical thinking, and also socio-emotional skill, which includes resilience skill, adaptability skill, flexibility skill, more importantly, learning to learn skill. Both technical and transversal skill has to be supported by foundation skill, which includes digital skill, green skill, and more importantly, STEM skill. In short, future landscape of skill of youth will be T structure. In the T, the horizontal strands where you have a transversal skill and domain-dependent technical skill will be at the vertical end. In my opinion, there are 3 major dimensions of youth resilience in present time. 1, technological resilience. We have to prepare for the youth for the technology that has not yet been invented. Definitely how? I will request Fiki to have another webinar to discuss that. If you have a generic knowledge, if you have a foundation skill, how you can cope up and adopt with new technological skill. Teachers, trainers need to know that. Second is learning resilient, developing learning to skill, adaptability, self-management skill, because lifelong learning will be the key. So to be lifelong learner, learning to learn is the key. Third is the character resilience. The character resilience is ensure good physical and mental health. Sorry to say, we have neglected health in technical and vocational education. Sound health and strong character is key for self-healing. And finally, my remark is we have to develop entrepreneurial mindset to start micro enterprise, startup, different thing. It's a different world which has got frugal innovation in mind. So it is a time of challenge. On the other side, it is a time for opportunities, a time for frugal innovation with Tibet as a master key. India with a huge number of youth and demographic advantage. I will promise if we can go with right direction, India can be a trendsetter in this direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Anita Rajan. Anita Rajan, you have seen this place, this skill scenario in India for a very long period of time. Now, we are in the post-COVID world. We have had distress all across the country. Many people are out of jobs. Many people are not able to get jobs. Economy has to come back. So what do you think, government has to do and industry has to do and people in FICCI have to do to make sure that we learn from our mistakes of the past and the misadjustments of the past, and we are in tune with the future and lead the future? In a very diverse, varied country, you have traveled across the country, you work with the former CEO of the Skill Associate, Skill entity, so you know this thing. So what do you see are the big priorities, 5 big priorities now, post-COVID?
Thank you, Dr. Pai. And as you introduced me, Tata Strive is a response to this national challenge that you spoke about. It's a response from the House of Tata, and we primarily look at the masses, that is, those who are economically and socially challenged. And the point that you raised about the big challenges, I have many, but it's difficult to find 5, but I will try and address them. I think let me start with the complexity of skill development. It isn't one intervention that will solve this problem. It is a cohesive intervention from different stakeholders, whether it's government, industry, academia, the community itself, through mindset changes, and people like you and me, average citizens. All of us need to see this problem and work in a cohesive way. And that's a difficult task in India, where we are the argumentative Indian. But if we start with the government policy, I think one of the mistakes that we have made in the past, and which we can learn from, is the need for education, skilling, labor, and industrial policy to be aligned. If we look at countries like Korea and Singapore, one of the reasons and the hallmarks of their success is that it is aligned. And actually, to this list, I will even add urban planning. If India is going to be a country, we're going to have 100 mega cities and people are going to move to cities. And one of the primary problems people like us face is our kids can't sustain to live in cities because they aren't paid enough for their roti kapda makan. So urban planning should include this reality. So these cohesive policy, which is aligned, will help people like us who work on the ground to actually have all the aspects that we need to market these skills to the children. The second thing that will happen with this is the demand and supply linkages. I think with, we heard the minister also talk about the promotion of certain sectors, whether it's energy, sustainable energy, whether it's electric vehicles. These are going to create future jobs. The linkage to supply, if there is a particular location where these jobs are going to be, are the universities geared to thinking about the courses that they will need to do, right from the low-skill courses to the PhD and research level courses that will be need to service this. So this linkage between demand and supply, and when I visited the IT Singapore, the person there, the director told me that at one time in Singapore, all the women wanted to become beauticians. So what they did was they curtailed the number of seats in colleges. They didn't allow so many seats for beautician courses. And that's how they gently nudged children, students in the right direction. So I think this demand and supply gap and the close-knit work between government, industry, and academia on one hand, and local businesses and community is the second point. The third is one of access. Dr. Pai, we all know the chasm that has been thrown open to all of us between the haves and have-nots is connectivity. My own organization started delivering blended learning within 2 months of the pandemic hitting us, but almost 30% of our students couldn't join because they just didn't have a mobile phone, or the mobile phone was with the father and they didn't have access to it. So connectivity is critical. That's, I think, the biggest learning. We need to do this under a scheme, provide mobile phones, whatever. And make industry, once they're connected, then we can have blended learning, we can have face-to-face learning, we can have our universities as learning, we can have all these formats. But we need to add one more, industry as a learning hub, training hub, that is through apprenticeships and internships. I think that's the third point. The fourth one is we talk about startups and entrepreneurship. And that's booming in India. We have over 40,000 startups, and NASSCOM tells us 1,600 happened in 2020. But how many rural startups do we have? Rural entrepreneurship is going to be key. Over 1 crore people migrated back. Where are the jobs? So I think we need to add this prefix to entrepreneurship everywhere, rural entrepreneurship. We train children, and when we provide them opportunities, for instance, electrician course, we said we'll help you set up something to make simple Diwali lights. Everybody buys lights there. We buy them, they come from China. Why can't our children produce them? But kids don't take up entrepreneurship because all through their education, they have this fixation of a job and they don't want to risk. The risk element is, they want their monthly income at the end because they come from families which are economically challenged. So these are how policy and, a cohesive sort of, effort from everybody will help solve some of these. I've just taken my top choices amongst all the things we need to do.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's very interesting. Professor Niharika, here is a question for you. You are the VC of the Delhi Skill University, but tell us, who are the people who are coming to get skill? And what is it they're looking for? And how successful you have been in placement? And do you think in the future, post-COVID, you'll have more and more people coming to you to be part of what you do? You're on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Pai, for the question. We are very new, so I can't really tell you what our placement is like and who is really coming to us. I can only say that in how we have conceived of the entire university's offering, we see a lot of excitement among the students. So from the day we have opened up our admissions, we have more than 30,000 students who are at least visiting our website every day. Yeah. So for the last 10 days, that's been the hit rate at the website. So there is excitement. There is people who are looking at it. I think the important thing that we are hearing from people in our conversations is that we are not saying that you get a BA in history or geography and you learn AC repair in an ITI. We are saying if this is what you're going to learn, if you're going to learn repair of electronics, then let's make that a degree. Why can't that be a degree? There can be enough science behind it, there can be enough practice behind it, and the industry needs such people anyway. The society needs such people. So our whole idea is to actually, what Anita said, is to align what the industry needs, what the students want to learn, and where the jobs are in the same place, rather than having them in 3 different places. So we have really had, I can't, I wish we were 3 years having this conversation. 3 years later, I would have told you what our placement is. We don't. But I can definitely say that from the analysis that we are doing of our hits, that people who are coming in and the expression of interest into the courses, these are not just students from the poorest of the poor homes. These are students from all walks of life. There are students who are reaching out to us saying, this is what I have wanted to learn all my, from while I've been young, and therefore I want to do this. We've had a beautician walk into our institute saying, I've been a beautician for 20 years and nobody has ever thought of offering me a degree in beauty and aesthetics, and she wants to register for the BA in beauty and aesthetics. We've had a journalist walk into our school and say, I have been doing this and I would like to do a bachelor's in the digital media and design. So I think the fact that there are people who are already working in their fields, are interested in the degrees, and the fact that we are able to work on degrees that are going to be that are job linked. In fact, our entire process of defining the degree has been based on our conversation with the industry, and the stand we have taken is, if we do this now, 5 years later this degree may not be relevant, so we will then have newer and newer degrees that we put in place. So whatever the industry needs is what we will put in at this point of time. So that is one of our experiences. If we look at our diploma programs, which is after class 10, which are in fact meant for the population who does not want to go to +2 or go the route to do engineering through a JEE or any kind of a central examination. There again, if we look at the experience of the polytechnics for the last 30 or 40 years, it has been very, very fascinating. There are students who have completed their 3-year diploma and have continued to work in the field, which is a lot more than what you find from an engineering graduate. So a civil engineer with a B.Tech does not necessarily work as a civil engineer, but a diploma engineer with a civil engineering actually works as a civil engineer. And I think that also tells us that we possibly either overqualify people in the B.Tech or we just get the wrong people to come into the program who are there only for the degree and not for the work or the skill that we have. So I think all I can say is that we need to move away from education as a way of creating a golden, working in an AC office, having a comfortable life and making a lot of money. We need to move into a place where we say education prepares people to do the kind of work it prepares for. So whether it is filmmaking, whether it is beauty and aesthetics, whether it is civil engineering, whether it is electronics, it must prepare them to do that work because that's where we need the people in all walks of life. So maybe that's where I will stop.
Okay, that's interesting. We'll come back to you. Now, Siddharth, you've been on the ground. You are a practitioner. You have seen the impact. You are a social enterprise. And tell us what worked in India over the last many years from your viewpoint, what did not work? And if you are the minister, what are the policy you will set for the future?
Thank you so much, Dr. Pai, for that question, and greetings to everyone on the World Youth Skills Day. Indeed, very inviting proposition to be in the position of the minister and find out what should be the priority. First of all, I would say, on that note that we have seen one very important change which has happened recently, which was what I would have also suggested is to have greater convergence between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Skills. And that to me is one very powerful signal which we are seeing, which was discussed in various conferences and conclaves and debates. And finally, there is something to look forward to in terms of that convergence. Because if I talk about a few points which worked or did not work, the major point was to treat training and formal education in silos. And over the last 10 years, with the National Skills Qualification Framework coming into being, what we've all been wanting is that bridge which can enable horizontal and vertical mobility for all the students. So that is one powerful thing which I think if that bridge is built between formal education and the skills training, that can be one that can be a very positive change in the whole ecosystem. The second is again when the NSQF actually came about, we also talked about a wage premium for skilled manpower from the industry. And we also said even for if I talk about tier 3 tier 4 towns, even for government jobs, which is quite the priority for many youth, the NSQF certification will become one of the eligibility conditions at par with the university certifications, right? And that to me is the second signal which when adopted not just at the central government but at all the state government level, would signal that we trust our skilling ecosystem. And if this person has come out of our skilling ecosystem with this NSQF level certification, he should be considered eligible for jobs, or he should be given slight premium as per the the wage from state to state. So that to me is number two. Number three, I think, is building that entire policy around data. For long, we have been devising schemes at the central and at the state level with not very clear view of where actually the demand lies. And it's not our fault, because of the complex nature of our workforce, the formal and informal debate, or at the central level, not a single source of data being trusted. So if we solve that problem, and if we fix the starting point of every scheme or project should be that data around which all the schemes are made. And in that direction, I think the advent of the district skill committees at each of the district for enabling bottom up planning and aggregation of demand for each district, at least in terms of intent, is a great move. And if really DSCs are able to revolutionize the bottom-up demand aggregation, that will be a very good data, instead of having a sector skill gap study done at a top level and then working around that. That is number four. And number five, I think what we've discussed earlier is and this is the most difficult part, this difference between aspirations and demand. So I really require many people, let's say in textile or construction sector, but the students still want to go towards IT or retail or electronics or BFSI segments. And this, the example of nudging students and moving them to the high demand sector, that is a big challenge, because students get placed, they don't like the environment in a textile mill, they drop out, they come back and they say, now give me a course in IT and I will do that, and then I will go for a job again. So this is and I'm talking from real experience, so this is a real problem at the ground. So these 4-5 things, I think, at the policy level, to me, are very important. Some steps have been taken in them, but if they are implemented and we all come together in the implementation, I think we'll see positive results in future.
Thank you, Siddharth. Now, folks, first round with all of you was very interesting. You could speak whatever you thought was important. Now, let us solve problems. All right? And we are going to solve problems in the next 15 minutes. Each one of you has to solve a problem. Now, Shyamul Mukherjee, assume Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath calls you and says, I want your help to transform the skill ecosystem in UP and provide, let us say, 4 crore jobs for the next 5 years. And I'll give you full autonomy. Tell us what you will do. You studied this thing, you know the theoretical base, you worked everywhere, you traveled around the world. Now tell us, you are in charge, you are accountable, you have to deliver. What are the things you will do as the person in charge with full autonomy, backed by a strong chief minister? Anita, you are next.
Very good proposition. I think I will get a good amount of salary for that.
You should.
The first thing is important, whether it is UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, anything. One thing I will say, one size doesn't fit all. One thing you have to keep in mind, that if we find a solution of one state and replicate this one to another state, you are going to fall in a trap. Because
absolutely,
the key word is localization of skill. I'm talking from international perspective.
yes.
We have talked about globalization, very correct, but we didn't localize the skill. The skill demand is at the grassroots level. It was pain to me when I visit some of the ITIs. They are offering, say, mechatronics courses, whereas the area is a remote village where the farming, where they do the fishing. There is no course about that. But when I went to Philippines, I was Director General of Colombo Plant Staff College. You will be surprised to know they have given the autonomy of 30 to 40% courses module should be on local needs. You cannot dictate from anywhere. You have to do your need analysis. You have to identify what skill is important and train them. That is the localization of skill. This is important in the I will call, say, the lower and mid-level work. When it comes to hire, here is a one message to you, to all of you. I'm not talking of only Uttar Pradesh here. I'm talking to India now. You know that if you study very carefully, there is a huge premium in the high wage skill, and it will increase because of automation, because of contactless, different things are coming, because of lot of things are happening where proximity of the skill means those who are physical proximity are closer, they will be disrupted. That job will be disrupted, will be replaced by technical thing. Who will support that skill? That is the skill more and more will be important. Give one example. Say skill for digital skill is only one word, but basically it starts from automation and it goes to cyber security. It can go to media, the today we are talking in Zoom or WebEx or anything. It's a lot of things are coming up. Multimedia, different skills are coming. So that's digital skill is a wide range from e-commerce to service sectors. You come to healthcare. Health is a very important. People are giving top priority on health now. There's a huge shortage of nurses, doctors, the paramedical staff. There's a shortage of training in a huge number. That the job is there, and we only have to train them. And more hospitals and will be coming in, infrastructure will come. Who will man that? So that's another sector you have to keep in mind. Third is the logistics sectors. The logistics sector is changing randomly. I'm writing inventory to everything. Who will man this entire thing? Same job, science, technology, engineering, and arts and maths. These related jobs are in the high demand. And finally, the pharmaceuticals industry. You see, worldwide, there is a mess now. And India is very good at two, one on IT, another is on pharma. We will lose the ground if we don't take initiative now to take that challenges. So for me, the solution is like this. For low and mid income, do need analysis, localization of skill will be the important factor, and job. You and me are not magician. We have to go on the ground, do the need analysis, see where the jobs are, how we can support them. That is one sector. And nationally, we have to see India as a country. Like we have taken huge advantage on IT. Everybody knows India has done a good job. And now situation has come. We have to be another, we are getting an opportunity in pharma, in the STEM-based industries. If India has to come forward, then that will be a big, advantage. That's my, in short, brief, in my opinion, which I will tell to my chief minister.
Professor Niharika, now I know you told me you want to go. Now you tell me, you are the DC of Delhi. CM Kejriwal calls you and says, I'll give you 5 years. You are numero, tell me what you're going to do, transform skilling, give jobs to young people who need the jobs, and tell me your strategy. What will you do? Now, it has to be very practical steps.
Mentioning my strategy right now.
Yes.
So designing all the various courses that will allow people to learn the skill in depth and to also learn the skill with the industry. The second thing I would do is I would work on helping upskilling all the various people, whether it is construction, plumbing, electricians, vertical gardeners, and all of that. The third thing I would do is I would create a huge amount of opportunity for roadside entrepreneurship, which will then be the consumer of the people who are skilled, and that skill and entrepreneurship together would create economic activity and growth in the country, in the city or in the state. So I think it has to be multi-pronged, educate, formalize and upskill people who are informally trained, and create a huge amount of entrepreneurship opportunities, whether it is from the person who is right now repairing shoes at the side to somebody who's selling vegetables to whatever. So take all of these together, create entrepreneurship active opportunities, and then get them to actually skill at that level. So that's what I would do.
Well, good. Interesting. Now, Anita, I'm going to give you an interesting state. You probably know the state much better. Bihar. Bihar is the poorest state in India, lowest per capita income, I think is about 50,000 rupees. India is 1,45,000 rupees. Their urbanization, I think, is about maybe 12%. GER is about 15%. And Nitish Kumar, CM Nitish Kumar calls you, Anita, and says, Tatas have been there in undivided Bihar for a long time. You started in Jamshedpur. You know the entire area. Now tell us, what are you going to do over the next 3-4 years to transform Bihar, skill these people, and increase their income and make sure they get jobs? You are on mute, Anita.
So I'm transmigrating to Bihar right now. And
Yes.
The first thing I'm going to do is look at education. So I have a 5-year horizon, and I want my impact to be there in the next 10 years after that. So I'm going to completely reimagine education. What is going to be taught? And that is going to be linked with the skills that are needed for the Bihar of the next 5-10 years. I will be completely disruptive and change the educational curriculum. I'm going to set up training schools for teachers who will be able to deliver and have the skills for that. I am going to look at how we teach. I'm going to promote learning by doing, working with hands, teaching things which are relevant to the local community. And that will be the first thing I will do, is about fixing education. The next thing I'm going to do is ask the Chief Minister that I want an audience with all those 5 ministries that I spoke to you earlier. I want to know where is Bihar, what are the economic development strategies for Bihar in the next 5 to 10 years. Where are those jobs going to come? And I'm going to fix my education system to deliver to those jobs. And what that's going to do is going to provide jobs to Biharis in Bihar as far as possible. But I'm also cognizant that I need to develop skills for national, regional opportunities. And therefore, I'm, as part of Tata's, I'm going to get Tata's and other companies to be working very closely with academia. And Dr. Pai, you're from the IT industry. The IT industry is a shining example of how they have looked backstream and fixed the supply pool forever. And that has only happened because of the close partnership between industry and academia in terms of talking about trends and talking about what's to come, what are the skills to come. So whether it is in mining, whether it is in all the different specific sectors where Bihar is known and rich for, the jobs will be linked to those sectors. The next thing that I would like to do is what my co-panelists mentioned about rural linkages to the community. And this is what China has mastered, where necessarily local schools and district officials were empowered to actually frame and create programs and curriculum which met the needs of local industry. They were empowered, and this is a very, very big thing. They didn't have to wait for the center to do it. It was done locally. And I would allow for that kind of empowerment to happen so that local demands and businesses would be very closely linked to the community. So I think bringing this ecosystem together, fixing education, making industry, supply and demand side work together, and local empowerment would be my 3 top things on the agenda to make Bihar a completely different state.
Well. I'll recommend to Mr. Nitish Kumar to get you there. I think he'll do a great job. Now, Siddharth, take Orissa. You are part of the university there, right? You're on the governing board of the university there, right? C.V. Raman University.
No, in MP and Chhattisgarh, rather.
Okay, take MP.
Yeah.
Take MP, because MP has very strong agriculture, fastest growth in agriculture for the last 10 years. Now they got money, they're industrializing, urbanizing, etc. Now you are in charge of, MP. What did you do?
Yeah, so interesting. In Madhya Pradesh, that way, has been the country's top state in terms of winning the agriculture and food processing award year on year. We are largely still an agri-focused state, but over the past 7 or 8 years, there has been decent industrialization which has happened in pockets. So I think to start with, first of all, I would speak to my counterpart in industries department and MSME department and find out what are the sectors in which investments are lined up in the coming years in the state, and I would rather make that information public and also publish that these are the sectors and estimatedly these are the number of jobs which I will require in the next 5 years or let's say 10 years based on the investments which are coming in. That is at the top. And at the bottom up level, I would rather lean on the ODOP list of the government of India and find out the one district, one product for each of the districts. And, the point which Mr. Shamal was making, localizing of the skills. So, some of the districts are very strong in terms of, the food processing, if we take rice or wheat or any of those things. So I would also try and link up skilling with those products so that livelihoods are guaranteed after the skilling. So one is the top level planning and the bottom up planning. Second thing I would do is to push apprenticeship at a big level for work integrated training at all the industries. I would probably incentivize, on top of the apprenticeship promotion scheme and make some budget for Madhya Pradesh to incentivize apprentices or the industries who are keeping apprentices in the industries, because I think increasingly we are all realizing that apprenticeship is the way to go forward for work integrated skill development for youth. Third, I think I will lean on the new education policy to make sure that we integrate the skill development at the school level, and I would increase the ambit of number of schools which are under the vocationalization of school education scheme and ensure that 100% of the schools are covered under the vocationalization scheme so that the integration happens at the right level. And I will also at the college level probably introduce skill courses at all the 500 or 1000 government colleges which are there, which can lead up to the employability of the students. Finally, in terms of improving access, I would ensure that we have some kind of PPP model which can incentivize the private sector to set up quality skilling infrastructure at the blocks and at the districts which are vacant in terms of still having a skilling center, so that the access is at least even and students don't have to travel 100 kilometers or 70-80 kilometers for accessing skills. And finally, taking a leaf out of Miss Anita, I think micro entrepreneurship or rural entrepreneurship is what she's spoken about at length. And even in Madhya Pradesh, a lot of economic activity happens at the block and at the rural level. So I will encourage enterprises either through banking or through IT or through electronics sectors, which can generate thousands of micro entrepreneurs in the state, and all of whom can actually give jobs to 4 or 5 persons more. So this, in a nutshell, would be my, I think, 6 or 7 point agenda for the state.
Good. You passed the test. Now, Shamal, for India, we have a major challenge. And I think many of you have picked up the challenge. The challenge is skilled people don't get a premium. People hire you, and if you give them a skill certificate, they don't pay you a premium. They pay you the same stuff. So when people feel I've got skill, I passed this course, I spend this money, but the next guy could be hired. How do you solve this problem? What are the policy intervention required to solve this problem?
It is too difficult to really to appreciate this issue, because if somebody has a premium skill and that is in demand, so definitely the industry will will give the high premium generally because that skill is shortage. Now, if the things is that you are talking of premium skill on papers only, actually you don't have that skill. And then the question comes, having a certificate and no certificate has no meaning to anybody. You can apply for government jobs and others, but when you are really looking for a skilled person to do the job and you are ready to give the premium. I know many of my relatives and others now working in America or in UK and others. They are only bachelors. They all are very good programmers. They're not asking them, why you completed masters, why you have not done PhD, doesn't matter. The shortage of skill is so high, the premium already being set in. They are getting high salary for that. Why? They know the artificial intelligence, some kind of things, or the languages which are very. So here the question will come to ensure that if you want to create an environment where the premium skill get real reward, then you have to ensure the quality of the premium skill. And largely, I think, I have no detailed idea because I have not been in India for long years, but my feeling is that there is a questionable thing. But those who have that, they're getting good jobs. I'm talking of higher learning area. You talk about IIM, IIT, and others. Yes, they are the premium institute. Even
but
some
Chamal,
of these.
they're 1% of India's workforce. See, one of the problems we have is all this, IT and all is just 1 to 2% of India's workforce. It doesn't apply to 80% of people. Now, what do you do with 80% of people? That's the question.
So that's one is that the industry, they will look for the quality skill. And if you can ensure the quality skill, like even if a person has no certification, why RPL, recognition of prior learning system, being adopted and give the certification based on this regulation of certification has to be very careful. Once this will really hit the confidence of the industry, they are ready to pay for it because ultimately they get the benefit. That's my understanding, because more or less majority time I have seen everything is on paper. Actually, we lack on hands-on skill and the measurement of hands-on skill in the proper sense, which we do not see any relevance. But when we are really finding some of the industries doing well, they are going for pillar to post to get a good skilled person.
Okay. Anita, please answer that question too. What do you think should be done to make sure that people with skills who come off your skill training, blah, 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 get paid better so people get attracted to skill? And the second question is, Anita, we have not done well in labor-intensive industries in this country. The great majority of our people can go to work for jobs which pay 15, 20, 25,000 rupees. The factory kind of that. China has done very well. They did labor-intensive industry, then they did higher education, then they build infrastructure, then they build high-tech industry so that millions of people could get employed. We have not done that. We incentivize capital, not labor in this country. So the two questions for you. One, which I asked Shamal, how will you bridge the gap? And second, how will you create labor-intensive industry which can absorb all the people in Bihar who have a minimum amount of skills? They don't have your IT skills. They're not highly educated. You're not going to do it in the next 10 years. It's going to take 15, 20 years. And every year in Bihar, maybe 25 lakh young people are coming into the workforce. You're on mute.
Great questions there. So I'll take the first one about how do you work towards premium. Of course, as my colleague said, this is a demand and supply sort of equation. And but there are a few things that in my mind we can do. If we consider why IIT students are able to command a huge premium on what they do, it's because that there is a guarantee of the kind of things on the skills.
No, Anita, they created a shortage. No, Anita, we know this. They get good education, but they're not the cash whisker. They created a shortage, the brand shortage.
Yes, I'm coming to that. So the problem in skill is, of course, an oversupply. But the other problem is also the value of the certification and the value that the employer gives on the certification, which is where I was comparing the IIT. So if we have qualifying tests for people who come in where the employer is guaranteed that the individual that who is coming in stands and has all the skills or the knowledge or the requirements of the job requirement that the organization has, the company will pay. I really do believe that. Let's take, for example, in the pandemic itself, the kind of new age skills or the different kind of skills that companies want. Let's say the job definition itself now incorporates these new age skills which are required. And you test students in whatever way, whether it's doing through their practical or their knowledge or a demonstration of their skill. And the company is assured that they are indeed qualifying that. What I'm veering towards is having a sort of qualifying exam, an equalizer, where these students are able to demonstrate and guarantee to the employer that they do have those skills. That could lead to some premium. I also admit that as long as the supply exceeds demand, we will have to live with this position for some time. And there may have to be some, even the minimum wages, Dr. Pai, are not met. There are stated minimum wages in different cities, which I know that when we place students are not met. So even if there's policy, implementing it is going to be a challenge. So I think it's also a question of time. We're going to have to live with this problem. Coming to the second point that you made about the labor-intensive industries, I think, again, if we take a page out of how other countries have moved from labor-intensive industry to more premium on what they do, is by introducing technology, introducing elements of design. We are a large exporter of leather, and we export raw leather. And people who sell all the fancy shoes and the Gucci's and the other people make all the money because they're adding their brand and design. So I think India has to elevate itself and introduce a friend of mine is in the leather business. And in a small state in the South, he's actually training people to create high quality leather using the best machinery, high technology. And guess what he's exporting to? He's exporting to the marine business in America to create, products for the high net worth individuals who own yachts. So it's not as if India doesn't have the capability to do it. I think whether it's textiles, whether it's leather, we need to look at it very critically to introduce design elements, to introduce technology and automation in this. Our people can be trained in it and move up the ladder to command a premium on finished products, not just raw products. That would be my take on it.
Okay. Siddharth, here the question for you. 70% of all young people completing class 12, 70% of all young people who enter class 1 don't go to college. Our GR is only 26, 27%. Now, some of them may go into agriculture. Assume about 20%, 25% goes in agriculture. 40% need to get jobs. So how will you skill them, and what kind of jobs will you create for them? What do you want to do for them?
Yeah, so I think dropouts at each level, and especially the dropout at the school level from between the 9th to 12th standard, and then the huge dropout after 12th standard, the way we measure GER, that is one major challenge for the country. And as you could see, we have taken a target of 50% GER in a very short span of time, which looks difficult to achieve. So assuming that all those students are not formally enrolled in the higher education segment, I think there are only two, if I look at the formal sector, let me look at the formal sector first. There are two ways to, catch hold of them. One is the apprenticeship route, through which, at a 10th pass level, and in some cases, even at an 8th pass level, he can do a bridge course and then be employed at a workforce for 3 years. After which he gets a valid certificate also, and then he might get a chance to get formally employed also in that industry. Second thing is the infrastructure of the government and private sector of the skill training centers. I'm not saying to create fresh skill training centers, but the convergence in terms of utilizing the ideal infrastructure at a school or a college level can be brought in to catch hold of those students. One way to do that also is that at a school level, many of these candidates actually go to the open schooling structure. When they drop out of the formal schools, so the students can also be tapped from the NIOS and the state open school stream, where we know that they are not involved in the formal schools, and they must be looking for jobs, or they must be working in the agriculture or parental occupation. So that is on the formal sector. Regarding informal sector, I would still say that unless we incentivize and create those courses which are very tightly mapped with the local flavor, with the local skills or local economic activity of that district, it's very difficult to catch hold of these school dropout guys, because we are not going to have an uniform presence of industry in each district, but there is an economic activity in each district. So one is we can get hold of them for linking up with that. If these two methods fail, then the third stream of entrepreneurship and self-employment and micro entrepreneurship should come to the rescue. And in our experience, there are several such streams available. Let me talk about financial inclusion and banking kiosks at the rural level and at the semi-urban level. Each of these kiosks employs 5 or 6 people, and there are at least 30,000 such kiosks in the country today. So likewise, if the candidate is not getting ready for a formal sector or informal sector job, we have to prepare him for a micro entrepreneurship or self-employment level to make him part of the workforce. Upfront, I can think of these 3 interventions.
Okay, Sumit, do we have Q&A or do we have closing remarks now?
We have actually we have a next session, but maybe 1 or 2 questions if you would like, we could take.
No, I think I think we send the question to the panelists. They may answer them. We'll close it. Folks, we had a great session, because I see Ratnesh is very eager to start. Folks, we had a great session, and what are the answers that we get? Post-COVID, things are going to change, maybe dramatic, yes. What we need is localization. We cannot have one policy suiting everybody. Maybe localization by district. Second, look at the jobs that are going to come up in each district and create the skills required for the district. Change education and make sure education is more responsive. Work on the NEP to make sure that it happens. Improve the apprenticeship program. Have clear connect with industry. And lastly, the important thing is you need a lot of data and intelligence to have a bespoke model for every state and every district, rather than one big policy of the government of India, which cannot be implemented anywhere else. Thank you very much. And thank you all the speakers. I think we had a fascinating session. And thank you very much. And thank you, Sumit.
Thank you,
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shamul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very interesting session, I must say. And thanks to all the panelists. And thank you so much. Special thanks to Mr. Siddharth Chaturvedi for the support for the program. Thank you, Siddharth. And now we move on to the next session, which is again a very, very interesting fireside chat. The topic is the future of everything. So we have Mr. Akshat Tyagi, who's an entrepreneur and author of Now That We Are Here. And in conversation would be Mr. Ratnesh Jha, who is the chair of FICCI Publishing Committee and CEO of India and Southeast Asia of Burlington Group. Ratnesh, over to you.
Thank you, Sumit, and thank you, Mohan, for such a charged session, if I may say that. While he mentioned in the end that I was looking forward for the session, but I was lost listening to a great points which was made in the last session. I think this session is important from many perspectives, but it is also important for us to take a little break and reflect where we are right now, and what's really has hit us in the last few years. What we experience is not the time, but we experience the change. And as Aristotle said, that time is nothing. It is the change which is the most important thing. But what is time? We measure time after and before, and that's the time for you. We have never realized that the smallest thing can make so much of difference in our life. That small virus, COVID-19, has changed many countries, many economies, and many sectors. And in the discussion today, I was patiently listening to the panelist, and many of those ideas which existed earlier with the same panelist has itself gone through a change because the way the change really happened. So what is important for us to recognize, it's not the time, it is the change which is the most important thing in our life. For a moment, you realize that, if the days passed, weeks passed, sitting in one table, taking Zoom calls, it didn't really matter, because it was one change. That virus made so much of restriction in our life, and we stayed back home, doing many conversations. I have today with me, and why this is also very interesting, is a young, dynamic, an author of a, he's just not an author, he's done many startups. He is one of the authors or the practitioner who believes in real public policy, both in terms of thinking, arguing, philosophizing, and implementation of policy. He's looking at some of the core of equity, sustainability, something which he really likes talking about, or kind of doing research on. And I think he's a passionate technology guy who's actually done enough and more in his own startup, but also done many things as part of his journey of life. Let me introduce, and I think Sumit has already taken his name, Akshat Tyagi. Welcome, Akshat. I'm in conversation with you for the next 45 minutes. And as I said in the beginning, in a brief chat with you, it'll be a more of a conversation and trying to get to know how exactly your journey been and what are your thoughts and how exactly are you shaping up some of the things which you're talking in your book. But before I start, I must ask you this very basic question, which is what you're saying in your book and what you're talking about, are these the prophecies, or are these the ones which you really want to be practiced? And I think that's one important thing which was going while I was reading your book.
I see. Hi, Ratnesh. Great to be with you today and really excited about the event today. Hi, everyone. I'm Akshat, and I'm the author of Now That We Are Here, The Future of Everything. The book is a compendium of essays around the future being deeply impacted by the technology that is very much near us, especially after the pandemic. So yeah, that's what the book is about, and I'm pretty excited about it generally. About the question of are the themes in the book like behavioral economics and automation, AI, data, are prophecies about deeply impacting the world, or are they really coming to life now? I think when one starts to talk about the economy of the tomorrow, or even the society in general of tomorrow, those predictions become really hard. So anyone who goes about trying to imagine, an alternative universe, an alternative economy consisting of really high tech employees and citizens using technology very deeply, those processes kind of evolve over time, and it's really hard to go around constructing an utopian vision for the society. But I think what's also true is that certain principles would continue to go forward. So, for instance, the principle of non-linearity, right? The process of how technologies grow, or how societies evolve, or how business models work. So, those kinds of principles are going to be very much alive, but not really like the exact pointers about what it's going to look like.
Thanks, Akshat. I think you did mention about the principle of non-linearity, and I think there are discussions which we heard also the panelists talking about. There are people who think that go deeper, build much deeper domain knowledge, or you think wide. In terms of, and then there are ever-growing discussion in terms of what are the new skills, resilience, social, emotional skills, etc. The combination of what, if you want to build deep or go wide, And with all this non-linear thing which you talk in your book, and you've given example of how Amazon started as a bookshop, and then they are the largest cloud player today. And anybody who spends anything on Netflix or the Coursera anywhere, $1 goes to Amazon. That's that we've seen also in many examples in India. But what are you saying? Are we looking at deep or are we looking at wide?
Right. So the dichotomy of explore versus exploit, I think, varies, to the level of wealth and also the depth that societies themselves have. So, for instance, if you live in a more abundant society, you'd have more space to explore and try out different things, and then really, decide what you'd like to go forward. And if you're living in a more resource scarce society like India, or let's say you are a middle class youth, there are only so many opportunities that you would have in life to like make it stable for yourself economically or climb the social ladder. So I think that varies, but at the same time, what's very exciting about the future is that those possibilities are changing across geographies. So even if, let's say, you are in India and you happen to acquire some of the skills that are in demand across the world, it's pretty easy for you to kind of explore and invent at the same time. So a part of that is like happening as a result of technology. And the second more important thing is how we imagine even people's career cycles is kind of very similar to how actual good business models also evolve. So they start out by doing something that they think would make sense. So in case of Amazon, it was to start selling books. But then if you look at the trajectory of how those things evolve, they diversify to whatever the company thinks might work out or it thinks it is the future. But then in order to get to that stage, you kind of need to build an arsenal of resources, right? So I think that is the part which gets missed in a lot of business models in India also. So when we start thinking about, let's say, government policy also, the impact of it would not be linear in the short term. So we give the example of also the Hong Kong Metro and
Sure.
how most of the income that the metro system generates is not really from the ticket system, which we think it would be, but the fare box recovery ratio is fairly small compared to the other incomes that the metro system can generate for a society or a government, right? So we have to start imagining how do we solve complex problems in ways that are not so intuitive, right? We also give the example of I think when 2G started to come in India and there were very expensive telecom plans, right? So the way that telecom operators started to make a lot of money was by offering those ringtones on a paid plan. So, some people would like to buy those paid ringtones and kind of subsidize it for people who can't pay for even calling people up. So imagining, solving these problems also in ways that are not so easy. Yeah.
So, Akshat, very interestingly, before I ask you the next question, I'm actually getting back to what you said just now, the Hong Kong Metro example, where you're saying that the revenue what they generate from the basic fee of the metro is nothing what they do to the adjacent services they provide. And I think the fundamental question which then come to your mind is really who we are as a country and who we are as an economy. And what's our culture, and I'm talking in context of what is our culture vis-a-vis some of the developing or thinking countries which we see have done well. We've had earlier panelists talking about Korea and Singapore model, but the country where we actually can only be compared to the large country like US and China because of the sheer volume and scale. And when you give this example of Hong Kong Metro, what really goes in my mind is to say that have they kind of thought of making that structure right in the beginning? And they said, okay, if I'm investing in Metro, let me look at adjacent of what I can create out of it. And therefore, or are they the one who, unlike Amazon, thought earlier and said, okay, if I'm doing it, let me start with saying that I can create multiple avenues, unlike what we have seen in Delhi Metro, for example. You have a standalone, we're struggling in terms of funding a basic set of metro services itself. There is a real shortage of fund. And I think if you compare contrast with what's happening in Hong Kong and what's happening in Delhi Metro, is the right example to see. Was it because of the structural issue? Was it because of the cultural issue? Was it because we did not conceive in the beginning? What do you think about this?
I see. So the difference between like conceptualizing how you can solve problems innovatively versus coming to those solutions later and just starting in the beginning. I think even if you compare the Delhi metro system right now to like the Hong Kong metro system, the Delhi metro system has done actually fairly well, right? So it does manage to almost break even, and also does a lot of the stuff that Hong Kong metro system does. So for instance, it leases out the station fronts to private players and allows them to maintain the facade and like also pay for the maintenance and stuff. So that generates revenue for the metro system and doesn't make it spend on the station services. But the problem, and I think that is where the cultural difference also comes in, is when we started leasing out those station fronts to the private players, what you see now is that a lot of those stations have been sold to PSUs themselves. So it's like there would be an LIC, Vaishali station, Bank of Baroda, Noida station, something like that, right? So what we are basically doing here is changing money from the pocket of the government to the other government, right? So if we are going to only have the facade of trying to invent innovative solutions and not really work towards a method wherein private players would genuinely benefit from having those branding rights on the station, and that is why they'd come for it, right? And we saw that classic case in the IIT JEE FITCI station also, right? So it was a private player which acquired the station rights, calling it FITCI IIT JEE station, something like that. And then there was a huge outcry, and one of the PSUs now owns the naming rights for it. So I mean, how do we come from being genuinely honest about creating wealth and also having these public-private partnerships in a way that actually benefits the citizens and not just like makes it look like?
Sure. I think in your referencing in your book, you have talked a lot about technology, and I think you practice that in your startups, Akshat. What do you think are the human advantage in the age of technology? The way we are, while I clearly don't agree, the artificial intelligence is disrupting Indian skill ecosystem. We're way far from that. That's my own personal opinion. But what do you think clearly a country such as ours, where we have a population real advantage, what is it which is really the human advantage over what we see some of the conversation about the technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc.?
Right. I think you're absolutely right that artificial intelligence, despite uh, the hype that it gets, is not immediately impacting our workforce as such, right? But what is also true is that the impact of technology is not that direct. So for instance, when the pandemic happened, that time the fact that we are still able to communicate is as a result of the video calling or the remote working technologies that had developed a few years back. So people might want to believe that nothing fundamentally changed in that process, but then the fact that we got rid of the transport and all the workers associated with it to enable us to work, and so much else that goes on between you going to your office, right? So if we remove that bit and we start just communicating online, a lot of people's jobs are a threat, right? But if you imagine it without self-driving cars and everything else, it might seem like nothing really changed, right? We never got the self-driving cars, the drivers are on the road, so like what really got impacted with AI? So that is not happening as such, and also the impact of technology varies across the skill levels also, right? And ironically enough, we imagine that the lower skill workers, or the workers who use their hands and arms or dexterous skills, would be the ones that would be most deeply or most immediately impacted. And it's actually the opposite that happens. So it's the workers who have gone through the knowledge economy and have been trained and skilled and who use mostly their brain in order to create wealth were first impacted with AI, since that is a systematic gaining of knowledge, which AI is pretty good at, right? So, for instance, copywriters, right? So, in order to become a good copywriter, one, you need to have like gone through, let's say, a copywriting course, or you must be a really good writer and hence having practiced a lot. And there is an abundance of writers in the market, right? So, that might seem like a really complex job, but then we've already seen in the last year, very complex models like GPT-3 come out, which kind of already replace copywriters, right? There are companies which let you generate whole paragraphs about your own company with a single line. And it's a really complex of getting from there to like, replacing the copywriters. But they are first getting replaced and not the people who like unclog your sewage or something like that. So actually, there's this like huge disconnect between imagining who really gets impacted. And another example would be, for instance, what kind of services get impacted in the banking sector once you start using technology, right? So if you start eliminating whole branches because you've enabled all of that through the mobile or the web or UPI, so those are again high level workers. But can you replace someone who builds your home or who ferries you even from your home to your office? That's going to happen much later. So like we might have the better workers replaced first and the more unskilled workers replaced later. But again, this is not even about replacing. I think it is also about looking at how do we really value work, right? So the ideas of the knowledge economy valuing workers at a great premium, I think something like that was also talked about in the previous sessions, right? Like to what degree are we willing to pay the technology workers at high rates? So as a society, as we start to value some skills over the other, they're not just a function of market and supply, they're also a function of what we perceive as being more inherently valuable. And a lot of people, who work in the AI community have started to talk about how those ideas might be evolving. So, for instance, if you're working in front of a computer, right now you might be paid well. But because it gets easier to be replaced if you're working in front of a computer, since the computer is going to get smarter, the skills that can't be replaced with a computer right now might become more valuable. So if you are working with your hands and you are doing manual labor, that might actually come to be, more paid than your technology work. Yeah.
Oh, so I remember actually there was a listing of the jobs which highly likely to be disrupted, and I think that list itself was a debate that whether the technology can replace some of those skills. And I think you rightly in the last session we talked about the premium for the skill and how do we recognize the sort of labors and make sure that they feel good about whatever they're doing. The question which is also which was coming in my mind, when I reference again back to what your thoughts are about the whole the democracy across the world and the authoritarian regimes which we see, and within that, and that's not a question that it's not a question of compare contrast. What we saw that when there was some issues in terms of within those economy and then changes which is really happening, there are smaller countries like Vietnam came in with the informal sectors, and they started actually taking advantage of gaining out of that whole global ecosystem. And I think suddenly what really struck me to look at is that what are the kind of skill which they are generating? Are these skills formal? Are these skills like pharma, IT, or are these skills? And I think realize that about 17% of the job is only formal skills. Most of the job is in informal skills. These are all small and medium enterprises. And I think that is a combination of both the real technology and the human skills both. In your mind, is that also the governance structure, the way you govern or the way you actually, with this whole hyper connectivity and a new kind of a democracy which we're talking about, which opens up more than really making some of those hard changes which we require in terms of make. What do you think about that, about this whole, generating a new skill and therefore all these complexities within the governance and society which exist?
Right. So I think the question of who creates wealth and who actually does most of the work, I think that becomes an even more important question of equity in the next world, right? So for instance, right now self-driving cars are not that real, right? So let's imagine that in the next 10 years or the 20 years, they're real enough and they happen to become an import from the US, right, which does most of the self-driving research. So if it happens to become an import and a company kind of licenses an API to the Indian customers and most of the drivers get displaced, but at the same time, most of the wealth or the salaries that they were making is now being made by a company in the US, right? Or let's look at the case of Bangladesh, for instance, right? Where does most of Bangladesh's wealth come right now? It's from the textile sector, which is very difficult to displace with technology, since again it involves a lot of dexterous work. Robots are not good at stitching jeans; they might be good at creating 3D models, right? So if that is going to be replaced anytime soon, also, how do we look at global equity in terms of wealth? So if you take all the high cognitive resources and research and put it in the countries of the West, which currently have the resources to do that research, and you just make the low income countries the users of all those things, like how are we going to really do not just global governance, and also how do we compensate the workers within those economies who are being impacted fairly enough? And that's a complex question that remains to be seen how the jobs are going to play out. So and an easier way to explain this might be, let's say 5 years or 10 years earlier, since nobody could have predicted an Uber, how do you decide the wage distribution system of a company from the US that builds a ride hailing service, right? Even today we are unable to resolve that conflict, right? It's that other drivers are like, we don't want to pay the commissions to this company, and we'd rather independently run a taxi service and make money. But because users are starting to prefer the ride hailing services and they'd rather like the ease of technology, how do you build a structure wherein the drivers are able to not have to work overtime, or not have to do sleepless shifts in order to make ends meet? And how do you also ensure that these technology companies are able to reach a profitability stage, which they haven't been? So again, those are going to be questions that society also resolves over time, and these are not, alone business problems or technology problems. They're also political questions, and we've seen that play out in recent times. Also, it might seem that governments are starting to overreach when they make the American technology companies, for instance, comply to certain regulations around data, around how they conduct their business, etc. But then that's actually very necessary if you start to, imagine the impact of these technologies. So, for instance, if Facebook starts to have WhatsApp payments and it starts to combine it with other services in India, and because WhatsApp has, the easiest users in India, most of the users easily switch from other platforms to WhatsApp. So if WhatsApp controls most of the financial data and transactions, it gives too much leverage to a company that doesn't, really belong to your country, or doesn't comply with your local jurisdictions. So how do you resolve that question of like the technology being good and useful enough, at the same time it impacting real people in terms of their income, in terms of the repercussions of that technology, and how the generations going to be shaped? Yeah.
Young man, I can understand how what's really gone in that book and how deep research have you done with what you're giving as instances and example. Let me ask you the last question, given the fact that we have next 4 minutes and no 4 to 5 minutes. Sumit, is that what we have in terms of time?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so let me ask you the last question. Today is the World Skill Day, and many youths are listening to you on this panel. If you to have apart from the whole social emotional skill and cognitive skill, those are spoken about, and those are skills I'm sure we need, resilience we need. If you to advise them with the three, given your own journey and your experience, three to four things which you think is important for them to learn or upskill themselves. What are those 3 or 4 things which you would advise them to do?
I see. I think like I personally refrain from broad prescriptions, but let's say you belong to 5% or even 2-3% of the middle class Indians who kind of have had a generation of formal employment, or whose dads and mothers happen to earn, a living decent enough for you to have gone to a higher education institution. And assuming all those things, I think it's really important to start looking at global conversations, because what usually happens right now is there would be the development of new areas of work and wealth generation that would trickle down from the US and Europe, and that would happen over a period of about 5 years. And that's happening with AI right now, right? There is no real good research that happens in India around AI. And by the time those technologies have given moat to companies, or have been built into an advantage within companies, by that time we are too far behind, right? Then you can't catch up. So you have to really not wait for those conversations to come here and then start focusing on the skills. So like deeply focus on conversations which are really defining future. And also because we are becoming so hyper connected, you can afford to be geography agnostic right now, right? So anyways, you're working from home, right? Work in the Eastern time if you like, right? But don't ignore those conversations, since the impact of those technologies, unlike even the previous generation of technologies, is going to be non-linear, right? So it just takes one self-driving car model to work well enough to displace millions of jobs, right? It hasn't yet, and we are lucky, and we can't just pretend. I mean, this has been a government policy also to say that we are not going to allow self-driving cars in India, right? I don't think it's a question of allowing or not allowing, right? I mean, in fact, it's most of the Indian Americans who are going to end up working, building their technology, right? So sooner or later, it's going to come here, right? And if it's going to, it's no use pretending that it would not touch you. Again, for blockchain technology also, right? We can happen to ban it for a few years, fearing disruption in our financial system and everything else. But until we actually start to look deeper and also be on the same footing researching and trying to create new technologies, it's going to get really hard to match with the rest of the world. Yeah.
No use pretending. That's what I hear. And I think it is for you to start thinking about self-driving cars, start thinking about cryptocurrency, and start thinking about all the disruptor, and also to start taking them to the people who are in a class which they are very far away from some of these thinking in terms of equity side. So I think that's the message for the youth. Akshat, I enjoyed talking to you. Thank you very much for you to come on the FICCI platform, and look forward to have this conversation in the future as well. Thanks. Over to you, Amit.
Thank you so much. It's indeed a very, very interesting discussion, and lots to learn, and very amazing thoughts, Akshat. Thank you so much. Now, going forward.
Thank you so much, Sumit. Thank you so much, Rutnesh. Yeah.
Okay.
Great being here.
Thank you. Now, going forward, we have our co-chair of FICCI Skill Development Committee, Mr. Vikrant Sani, who is the chairman of Sun Group as well. Thank you so much, sir, for kindly joining us here. I request you to kindly deliver your concluding address.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumit. I think, dear friends, we had a very, very interesting deliberations today. Manish Sabharwal, my dear colleague, co-founder of Team Lease Services, I think he was very pertinent to say that every skill, should end up with a report of where all jobs are available. And also he was right in saying that learning is learning, but more important is learning with flexibility by universities is of course much more relevant. And India indeed has over 150 companies worth $1 billion. We have our own unicorns. But he was right in saying that we must distinguish between employment, employability, and skills. And Mr. Atul Tiwari, our Additional Secretary, Ministry of Skill Development, in the morning also, we had joined and heard our Honorable Prime Minister's address and our Minister Dharmendra Pradhan's address. And I remembered I had administered oath for apprenticeship program 3 years back at Vigyan Bhavan. So I think he was very right, Mr. Tiwari was very right in saying that Honorable Prime Minister Modi have made skill development a very high priority area under the program, and we are setting up the Vishwakarma Jayanti also under the program, and setting up of 75 Jan Shiksha Sansthans in rural areas is indeed a very, very, welcoming step, because our NGO, Sun Foundation, we have been running over 50 centers in rural areas because India is an agrarian economy, and we have to empower our rural youth and our rural women to really make the difference. And Atulji, thank you very much for highlighting skilling for youth. And also you highlighted our thoughts that we must incentivize our youth to join apprenticeship program, choice-based skills for youth in new areas. And also your assertion that government and private sector should work together, as partners for skilling for jobs. And my dear friend, Mr. Mohandas Pai, he was very vocal as usual that world have changed, and we must look through introspection that are we really skilling for jobs? What type of jobs are created with artificial intelligence, with paradigm shift, which is taking place? Digital jobs are taking over. It's a new normal, diversified skills for different areas. And he really highlighted a lot of new areas where we have new areas coming up, whether it is micro entrepreneurship or health sector, artificial intelligence. It is really in those areas where we have to concentrate now. And of course, with this COVID pandemic, we have loss of jobs, and our priorities post-COVID are quite different. I'm also grateful to the last fireside chat round from Mr. Akshat Tyagi, entrepreneur and author of Now That We Are Here. He has highlighted the innovative ideas of Hong Kong Metro, and have given a really very, very good views, synonymous views to Mr. Ratnesh Jha, our chair for Publishing Committee and CEO India Southeast Asia Burlington Group. So thank you. I think it was indeed a very, very engaging session, and I think let's concentrate for skilling on jobs. And as Mr. Mohandas Pai also said, there's huge premium in high skilling, digital skilling, automation, cyber security, multimedia, healthcare. And we all know that we have a lot of potential at the now COVID health workers, whether they are general duty assistant or fellow botanist or so on and so forth. So I think let us continue our services, our focus. And also in FICCI, we are doing a lot of cluster-based program. Last year, I think Sumit ji is with me, and also Dilip Chenoy ji for his opening remarks, that we must continue and we must unleash the potential of the apprenticeship program. And indeed, it is on Youth Skill Day I think we agree with Mohandas Pai, and I agree that our youth have to be agile and resilient. And also, as my senior colleague, uh, Niharika Voraji, who is the recently taken over as the Vice Chancellor of Delhi Skills and Entrepreneur University, she was very right in saying that youth should go to polytechnics and complete 3 years diploma. Now the time is to move away from theoretical education. We ourselves are working for skilling at the school level. So I think these all are very good thoughts, and I thank Vicky and Sumit Gupta and everybody, SG, Dilip Chenoy for putting up. And I thank all the our keynote speakers and all the participants who participated in panel discussion for taking out time of their busy schedule and join us on World Youth Skill Day today for a very meaningful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your views, your support, and your leadership as always. So this indeed had been a very, very interesting discussion, and particularly I personally liked both the panels and all the speakers. So on behalf of Vicky, I would like to thank each and every panelist and our leadership for all the possible support. I'd like to thank the entire team of Development Department for making it happen. Thank you so very much. And with this, we conclude this session. Have a great day. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.